Appreciate you all being here today for what is our third and final session in our Microsoft 365 educational series. As you know, that series has been focused on how to keep long-term and permanent records readable with digital preservation in your Microsoft 365 environment. And today we are talking about proven playbooks. So this is it's a session I've really been looking forward to. I know the team's been looking forward to sharing and have been getting feedback from folks who attended previous sessions. Excited to see the case studies we're going to be sharing with you all today about how digital preservation is brought to life and changes the way organizations manage and preserve records in Microsoft 365. Looking at the time here, we're just about 2 minutes in. So I think with that, if Scott and Sam, if you guys are ready, I think we'll get started here.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started, Laura. I can't believe we're on number 3 already.
Oh my gosh, I know. I feel like I literally said to someone, oh yeah, the webinar that we did last week. I was like, no, that was last month. Never mind. Time flies. Okay. So just a few housekeeping logistics here. So you will receive a link to the recording of this session after we're done the live webinar today. Please feel free to share that with your colleagues and on social media and whatever your channel of choice might be. We do love to get questions, especially as we go through our content today so that the team can engage with you and answer things as they pop up. So please do use the Q&A tab that's up at the top of your window. You'll see it next to chat and Q&A. I think both are working for this session today, but please do put your questions in Q&A and everyone can see those and vote them up as you like. If you really like the question, hit the vote button. And if we don't have time for all the questions raised today, we will of course be following up with you directly. I also wanted to mention that we will have 3 polling questions today. We like to get you all involved as much as we can within the logistics of the webinar platform. So please keep an eye out for those polls and please respond as you can. All right, so we wanted to start today, this session number 3, with a recap of what we've learned so far in the series. So in session number 1, we really explored the preservation gap that exists in Microsoft 365 today. We learned that while M365 offers, of course, robust collaboration and compliance tools through all the various applications, it doesn't provide true digital preservation. And so that's where active digital preservation and Preserve365 comes in. By doing active digital preservation, you now have permanent access to your high-value records, and with Preserve365, you have access to that content in perpetuity through SharePoint. Then in session 2, we took a look at what the cost of waiting is. What happens if you wait to implement secure active digital preservation, and how that really increases risk, especially for organizations utilizing legacy systems for important content. We also got to see a live demo of Preserve365 in action, which I know was really interesting, and we got a lot of good questions during the webinar and afterwards about how Preserve365 will work for your organization and how it all integrates seamlessly with Microsoft Purview and Power Automate. So now here we are, session number 3, and we're bringing it all together with some real-world examples of how all of this has come to fruition for some of our clients. And you're going to hear today how organizations are using Preserve365 to solve their, honestly, really complex preservation challenges. And we'll break that into some pieces to make it more digestible, and how they're doing that to future-proof their digital records. We do have some new attendees with us today in the audience, so welcome everyone. And of course, if you've joined us for 1 or 2 or both, welcome back. But with that in mind, and because we also have a new face at the virtual table today, we're going to do a brief round of introductions. So I'm Laura Starr. I am an intelligent information management consultant here at DocPoint Solutions. A lot of people do not know this. This is a fun professional fact. I am also a certified archivist, so maintain that certification to keep up to speed with archives and records management best practice. And in my role, I work closely with government agencies of all sizes, with courts, law enforcement, and also commercial customers to help them make the most of their Microsoft 365 environments and tenants. And this includes building smarter preservation-ready strategies that ensure vital digital records stay accessible and secure for the long haul. So I'm happy to be the moderator again for the session today and look forward to the conversation. And with that, Sam, I will hand the microphone to you.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Butler, and I am the Preserve365 product lead. I basically shape and influence the development, the marketing, the commercial and partnership direction of our intelligent archiving product and how it interacts with Preservica and the advanced digital preservation technology that we pioneer forward with Preservica. I've been around technology and product management in legal, critical infrastructure and compliance environments for around about 14 years now. So this is an interesting and new landscape that we're carving out with Preservica. I'm looking forward to showing you how we're doing that at the moment. Scott, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I won't say good morning. Hello, all. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for joining us. My name is Scott Money. I'm the Director of Operations. So my responsibilities lie with deliverables to our customers, and that can be anything along the lines of data migrations, content migrations, automating the office space, and also managing our team. So making sure our team has what they need to do their job. And of course, I join Laura all the time for pre-sales efforts, and I'm happy to be here again for our third session.
You haven't kicked me out yet, Scott.
No.
We're in it
Sam
together.
Have to volunteer.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Sam, you won't get rid of us now either. Okay. So this is just the framework for the conversation today, so everyone can follow along here. We're going to do a very, very quick overview of DocPoint Solutions and Preservica. We're going to be then jumping into our content, including a framework or a model for digitally transforming records and information management programs. That's based upon our experience working with customers in this space. So that'll be a conceptual model we'll share to frame the conversation. Then Sam is going to lead us through 3 case study analyses for 3 key organizations utilizing Preserve365 today. That is the state of Vermont, and then organizations, a city government in the US, and then a transportation company. And we'll get to see how Preserve365 is working for them at different scales and different levels of implementation. Then Sam will also show us the Preserve365 roadmap, what's in place today and what's coming. And then as time allows, we'll revisit our model, just kind of reflect on it, and then finally we'll wrap up. As I mentioned at the beginning, please do ask questions as we go, utilizing the Q&A function up at the top of your window. So very briefly, DocPoint Solutions, our specialization is in intelligent information management solutions, especially in using Microsoft 365. So what that means is that we provide professional services in helping organizations to modernize in a number of ways. It's modernization, automation of processes, more efficient content management, the automation of workflows, basically anything to improve the working life of our clients and also improve their records and information management systems, platforms, and workflows, especially in platforms within the M365 environment. And then Preservica, as Sam alluded to in his introduction, Preservica is the leader in active digital preservation, now, of course, embedded in SharePoint and other Microsoft applications. And Preservica ensures that there is long-term access, authenticity, and usability of organizations' most critical digital records. And they are trusted by governments and archives and enterprises all around the globe. And Sam didn't mention this, but we are very glad he's joining us from the UK with Scott and I here in the US, and we are truly a global organization and partnership together. All right, time for some audience feedback here. So we will now be firing up our first poll question. And there it is. I see it on my screen. Everyone should get that in a second. So we just wanted to take the temperature of everyone attending today. Where are you today on your records and information management journey? You have some options here. And this is how we think of these projects in phases. And so these answers are reflecting that. So right now you're assessing your data at its source. That might be paper, that might be legacy systems, it might be another content source. You haven't really moved anything yet. Maybe you're migrating all of your content to Microsoft 365. Maybe you are implementing records management in Microsoft 365 today through Purview and Purview labels. Or maybe you are even doing records management beyond Microsoft 365 in a system. Perhaps some of you are already Preserve365 clients doing that today. And if you are officially next level and what I think we all aspire to be. And maybe you're not sure. So there's those answers for you to choose from. And we are getting results here. It's always interesting to see this mix, and I think today we certainly have a majority of folks are at the beginning stage. They're still assessing data at the source or unsure. And that is perfectly fine. That is why we're here and why we're sharing our experiences and the experiences of our customers today. So wherever you are, we do hope that today's session gives you some actionable ideas to move forward. Please do also feel free to use the chat to drop in what your biggest challenge has been so far. Plop that in and we'll take a look and respond accordingly.
Right.
Okay, Scott. So let me move this forward for us here. Maybe. There we go.
Yeah, it takes a few seconds to move those. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, so we just want to touch base real quick on the technical side. We did talk briefly a couple slides ago about what was involved with the first two sessions. So just from a technical, briefly want to review that again. Some of you did attend, but if you didn't, here's a little bit of a refresher. So what we talked about is digital preservation. So key items with that are keeping your assets in their original format and preserving the integrity of our content. And what we mean by that is making sure that we're mitigating any concerns, maybe with deprecated file types, making sure we can search on that content. So the examples we had were WMV files, and they were also WordPerfect, for example, not items that you can natively open if you're storing those in a SharePoint environment. But by having that digital preservation feature added and capability, we can make that content searchable, because that's what we want, obviously, when we're storing content, especially long-term. Not only can we search on it, we can display it natively. We don't have to go through any kind of a conversion process to be able to share that file or demonstrate that we can open it. The other items we talked about, permissions, so not having to have two different permissions areas to manage. Everything we're talking about is managed with Entra. So there's not a Laura Star in this platform and a Laura Star over here. It's just one user, and we're managing that within the Microsoft environment. So there's no segregated user base, I guess is what I'm trying to say there. So we cover permissions, preserving your data, make sure it's searchable, make sure it's presentable, make sure we can render those files. And we did I think we walked through how to move the files so we can do either a copy or a move. That can be a manual process by just simply assigning a label. It can be automated. Maybe we're inheriting that label value, and anything that lands into a library inherits that label, so it's automatically transferred. Or we can do it with Power Platform. So we're not only talking about the capability of storing that digital asset, making sure it's accessible, but we're using the entire suite in 365, all the features available there. And that's what's really been great about this. So this has been a great series, demonstrating the capability to store that content in a perfect fashion, and also using your 365 subscription to its fullest potential. So not to get too far off on the technical side, but we just want to do a quick review of that. And now we can look over, and Sam's going to share some of those use cases with us. So I'm going to stop on the technical side and hand over to Sam.
I should have queued up
Awesome.
a drum roll, Sam. No, can't do it. All right.
That was good enough. That's better than I get most of the time. Awesome. Thank you, Scott. So yeah, I wanted to come and talk to you about some of the use cases that we're seeing with our customers with Preserve365. I mean, for those who don't have too much of an overview as to where we've been with Preserve365, Preservica has been around for a good couple of decades now, but Preserve365 is, I would say, probably still relatively early on in its journey because we launched it a couple of years ago, but it has gone from strength to strength in that time. And I'm looking forward to showing you where we're at with the roadmap on that shortly. But we have seen already a bunch of really complex, interesting customer use cases from tons of different organizations that protect some of the world's most important records in some instances. And it's been a real pleasure to be able to work with some of these customers and be a part of their challenges and also be a part of creating the solution. So I'm really excited to take you through just 3 of those today, but this is just scratching the surface for some of them, but let's get straight into them. So the first one that I want to talk to you about is actually one of our early development partners, which is the Vermont State Archive. They were with us right from the very beginning in how we actually make Preserve365 work in a way that is as intuitive as possible and also with as low adoption curve as possible if you're a SharePoint user or a Microsoft 365 user. The background there being that there was already a lot of friction for a state archive trying to get state agencies to take on another system, to work in another ecosystem. There's a lot of, anybody who works in a state or government archive will probably know some of the frictions that can naturally happen between the different organizations within that archive. And to Tanya's point here, I don't like to necessarily read just off of slides, but I will read Tanya's quote that Microsoft 365 is the largest record keeping system, and they need to manage and preserve records at scale within that. Nearly all of their records now are born digital. So what we obviously mean by that being created in place within Microsoft or in other systems. And the lines between that technology, the records management and archiving have blurred. I again would probably say that that is true, having spoken to a lot of records managers and archivists lately whose roles are now one and the same. And even some of those who are now reporting into IT, into legal, and there's just such a wider spectrum of needing to understand and wrangle the technology as well as doing the role. Waiting too long to address the digital preservation, they risk losing the records that document Vermont's most important public policy decisions. So collaboration and tools that work at source are essential. So let's get into what we did with Preserve365 in this case. So the Vermont State Archives had, I alluded to it a moment ago, a problem of, first of all, winning people over to make sure that they could gain access to the records, that when they hit retention and needed transferring to the State Archive, they were arriving at the State Archive, and they were doing it in a way that showed proof of ownership, that showed the transfer of ownership, and also that was safe, because a lot of their record transfer and a lot of state archive, generally government record transfers, are happening through the use of hardware, through the use of hard storage, through downloads, through emails, through physical sending of storage back and forth across states and across cities. And there is always an inherent risk of data loss. Now, Vermont is generally a Microsoft tenancy, and it's not just the state archive. Excuse me. It's fall over here, and I'm sorry, everyone's getting sick around me. But it's not just the state archive, it's also the state agencies as well. So they all sit under the one Microsoft tenancy. Now, from a Preserve365 point of view, this doesn't actually matter. We will serve multiple tenancies in any kind of permutation, whether you've got multiple Preservica tenancies feeding one SharePoint, whether you've got multiple SharePoints feeding one Preservica, or any combination of that in between. We can work with all of those in whatever way works best. But with Vermont, they had one Microsoft tenancy covering their state agencies and the state archive. So a lot of that friction was cleared in terms of being able to transfer records from one place to the other. The issue that we had here was that it was more about building it into workflows that already existed and then maximizing the use of the Microsoft tenancy as well. So top left here, I've mentioned automating archival workflows. Vermont State Archive have a very interesting setup where they weren't at the time utilizing Microsoft Purview, and they weren't utilizing a native out-of-the-box automated file management and file plan system. What they were doing was using Power Automate to build workflows that would take a monitoring image of all the files across their SharePoint for an expiration date or a disposition date, or even just a review date. Once it hit that date, somebody in the archive or agency who owned that record would get an email automatically from the state archive asking if that record was ready to be transferred to the state archive. If they agreed to it, then the transfer would happen. If they disagreed with it, then the retention schedule would restart and the date would go out. The issue here is that all that did before Preserve365 was it would just move it into another SharePoint folder. There was still risk of that file being changed, that file being updated, that record being lost. What we managed to do with Vermont was that we actually implemented the Preserve365 Power Automate connector into their existing flow. Very minimal effort, just to be able to put that Power Automate connector in place so that actually on click of the acceptance button, what now happened was an immediate transfer of that record to Preserve365. Key benefit there being that there's no download, there's no open repository, there's no risk of security permission lapsing and allowing somebody to access or change that record. But also on top of that, because we fire back a search stub to the original site or into the SharePoint native search, the owner of that record or the previous owner of that record can still search and see it if the state archive wants them to. And that was one of the big pain points with SharePoint for Vermont, was the ability to, if you're giving away your records, they're gone. There's no looking at them without a request. So FOIA still is relevant to the state agency as much as it is the state archive. And so that was really important for Vermont, that we could still provide that access to that record where the end user was allowed to see it. And that massively reduced their IT burden as well, because it meant that they could start to move things out of SharePoint live storage, the cost implications that come with that. It helps them maximize the Microsoft investment, because they're not then having to purchase extra storage from within SharePoint. They can reutilize the storage that they already have within Microsoft as well. But also because Preserve365 has automation for Purview retention labels as well, when they were starting to look at automating a file plan with Purview and upgrading their licenses, there was no additional need for any extra software that would then help them automate transfer of records from point A to point B. All they had to do was link together the Preserve365 action with the Purview label, and they could fully automate their file plan in a Microsoft first environment with Microsoft out-of-the-box tools, which allowed them to then start to pull away some of the Power Automate flows as well, which, as we all know, they are fantastic until the person who runs that flow leaves, or the person who owns that flow has been away for a while and something breaks and it stops working. So it just brought everything into a more secure sphere of influence. And yeah, it was it's been a great demonstration for us of how cross agency and state archive transfers have really improved through the use of Preserve365, which, from speaking with friends of ours at the Council of State Archivists, for instance, we know is a big challenge for them right now.
Sam, can you talk a little bit more about the makeup of the Vermont teams that were involved here? I mean, you've mentioned, I think, several different stakeholder groups. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, they have dozens, I'll probably say, of agencies within the Vermont State Archives and Records Agency that kind of report into them or push records through to them. And that would include, for instance, the Department of Health, the Department of Housing, it would be the Human Services. All of these had critical records that, for instance, may not have even had a retention, but they know they needed to keep them. Classic example is COVID records. So because they were completely using Microsoft for all of the recording of data, the COVID vaccination records were being kept with Microsoft lists, and that meant that they needed to be able to preserve them as they were as a database within Microsoft. But there was no retention decision on those at the time. So all we landed on, and all Vermont landed on, was, well, we've just got to keep them. We don't know how long we've got to keep them for. We don't know whether we need to dispose of them afterwards. We just know we've got to keep them. And the biggest risk there is even UI changes that can be released to lists, for instance, can be breaking changes to some of the existing data that's in there, particularly if it's incomplete or there have been mandatory fields added after the fact. That can really cause issues with that raw data. So the fact that we can then preserve that list in its entirety into Preservica and Preserve365 was a huge benefit for them being able to keep hold of those records until they knew what to do with them next, which could be decades from now.
I also just love the change management components of this too. Obviously, the technology is awesome and the ability to do that, but I mean, it supports change management and bringing everyone kind of into the fold in this, right? Like you mentioned how, the agencies with the stubs will still be able to access the content they're looking for FOIA requests and other things, right? And so it's like, suddenly we're all working together, right?
Yeah,
we're all on
sure.
the same team here. IT, department heads, archivists, records officers, everybody's on the same team through this technology.
Exactly that, right? We've always thought about kind of the way that state archives and then state agencies and then even just the departments themselves quite often work and act as individual pieces of a larger puzzle, and they do come together, but also there is natural friction that comes from just the pure scale of these things and the individuals that sit in the seats that make those cogs turn. There's a huge amount of technological friction with the pace that they've had to catch up with it with. I think in our next example, actually, this is another showing of how we don't just operate well at the state level, but we can also bring this down into a city government level, for instance. So
perfect transition.
Yes. It's almost like a practice.
It was right. I know. It's funny how that happens.
Yeah, I didn't know, to be clear, just for a quick peek behind the curtain to anybody. Turns out I can present. Okay, so yeah, another one of our Preserve365 use cases is with a US city government who we work with, and for a number of complicated reasons, we can't say exactly who it is, but we do work with them very closely in managing more than 300 permanent types of records. And what we mean by this is, we're not just talking long term at this point, which from our point of view is, let's say, anything past transitory, so 7 years onwards, we would class as a long-term record retention. But we also deal with cases where the record retention is permanent, and that can obviously mean anything as time transitions on. But the idea here is that this is never being deleted, and so it always needs to be available. And this spans across 54 boards and departments, so the elections department and the elections board, the city clerk, the finance, treasury for the city, fire management, mayor's office. They are all within the scope of the types of records that we need to deal with the city government. And again, they sit at the top of the tree with a Microsoft 365 tenancy and are constantly trying to get frictionless transfer of assets into their main repository, which in this case is now Preservica. But essentially, they are struggling with, or were struggling with, the decommissioning of old systems that were used as file shares, essentially, and would stay in place in the original file sharing software. And what they wanted to be able to do was take them either out of the Microsoft 365 tenancy or put them into the Microsoft 365 tenancy for them to be transferred through to Preserve365. So next slide, please, Laura.
Bit of a delay there. Sorry, Sam.
No, don't worry about it. And so this kind of doubles down on what I was talking about with the Vermont state example that I showed a few moments ago, with Preserve365 actually helping serve the departments, because end users, essentially, if they're using Preserve365, I've always said that this is almost like expanding the size of your archive and records function. One of the examples that I'll talk about at the moment is a very small record management function, particularly for those directly doing the digital preservation. And often records and archiving teams are low in numbers, low on budget, and they can find it difficult to get themselves heard and get themselves seen, even though they've got a pivotal and important role in collecting and saving the knowledge of that organization. Now, one thing that Preserve365 has done for this city government is we've opened up the self-serve ability to be able to send records from SharePoint into Preservica, but also retain access to those records through a self-serving search or through the stubs and breadcrumbing that Laura mentioned earlier, from putting links to the archived assets back into the place where they originated from. So even though provenance and trust in that record is protected, it's tamper evident, it's being kept safe in Preservica, it is still visible and findable in place in the SharePoint tenancy of the end users, who might not have any interest or knowledge of there being a preservation archive that they need to go and log into and get access to, and then work through all the great, wonderful workings that as archivists and records managers we have to do to keep those things properly looked after for the long term. What we're instead doing is giving a window into that through direct search with Preserve365. And so what we've been able to do is provide that full self-service retrieval. That's actually helped out the IT department, because they now don't have to field archive requests to be able to feed FOIA requests. That removes a lot of the tension, towards the IT team, which I think any IT manager will always be happy to have less frustration aimed at them for things that they don't really have too much control over. And also for the archivist in being able to serve that FOIA request, or the records manager to be able to serve that FOIA request. And then on top of that, because we don't just take the record, but we also take all of the metadata from SharePoint, and that includes anything custom that's been written in there as well. So if there are custom workflows that have been built, quickly going back to the the Vermont customer example, we also built our own custom columns into that SharePoint site so that we could carry out the transfer of ownership and show that the request had been completed. And that also is then carried through into Preservica so that the walkthrough of essentially the workflow of getting from the record being in place through to the record being archived is kept and captured, and that provenance and transfer of ownership is shown as well. So it's been really important for this city government because they can now show why the records are trusted, why they are defensible, because they've also got the key metadata alongside that record kept as what we call a multi-part asset within Preservica, and we will preserve each individual part of that as well.
Yeah, I'm just looking here at your slide and the sort of the groups that are highlighted here, right? Like the types of records and the departments that were engaging on this initiative with the city. I have many customers in the engineering and the land management space who, yeah, they have compliance requirements, and yes, those are very important. Of course, they're essential. But their teams out in the field also need to be able to have access through their through applications that are tied to SharePoint to those records. We're working with a county right now in Virginia to digitize all of those large engineering drawings, the as-builts, and they go back, hundreds of years in some cases, but the field teams and the engineers are still utilizing those same records to do the work that they have to do every single day. And then, of course, there's requirements from, the Library of Virginia and county archives to manage those in perpetuity. And then, there's also state of Virginia requirements from the governing boards in those professional, in the sector, right? So all of those, and the only way to meet all of those compliance requirements and all of those use cases is to have centralized, preserved content, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And there's I think there's one more slide on this use case, but I'm sure we've probably talked to it. But the use case that I'm going to go into in a moment is actually a great example of engineering highways use cases where that record is being referred to for more than decades. And I'm sure even when these records are created at times that nobody expects that they may still be pulled upon for, really basic things like being able to, trace a way that a fire hydrant was plumbed in, or trace the way that the street lighting was engineered. It's just such a these are the type of records that we don't really think about, until you see them and until you need to manage them, and especially until you can't get access to them. That's the real issue from our point of view. And you can see the four things that we've kind of encapsulated that we solved for this city government. Like I say, the FOIA responses, but also they've got a scalable growth solution now. Preserve365 can just get added to whichever site it needs to whichever user needs to use it to be able to securely transfer records from one place to the next. And then because of that, they've got improved policy compliance because they've got proof of records being the true record using Preservica's digital preservation technology. And they've also got secure storage because unless you are the actual archivist or you have clearance to be accessing that Preservica repository, it's the Microsoft 365 permissions that you're delegated through Entra that tell you whether you can access a record using Preserve365 or not. And even now, we've actually expanded that over the last couple of months so that that can be overridden even more. So if there's more classification that needs to be put in place after a record has been moved into Preserve365, using Preservica's security and sensitivity management, you can lock that down even more if needed, or the other way around. So there's so much flexibility and reliability there now that enables that speed of access and security of longevity of the records too.
Great. Yeah, and I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Just one quick thing. I think that speaks to how truly seamless this is. Sam,
Sure.
Those details you were mentioning, how the majority of the time, well, really the whole time, users don't even know it's there. The capability it's directly integrated. You're not leaving one environment to go to another. It's totally seamless. So I just wanted to mention that real quick, which we love.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I will probably talk to that in a moment, but Laurie, did you have a question?
So, when we're working with organizations, especially those like we saw in the poll, right? The poll reflected that a lot of folks are just getting a handle on their content. And so, when we first start an engagement in those scenarios, we are working very closely to analyze the business processes, optimize, do business optimization assessments, all of those types of components, the records management assessments, information governance. And when we start a program like that, we say, let's start at a manageable size, right? Like, let's do a pilot. Let's do a proof of concept. And so when we do that, then we are usually engaging with, in the case of a municipal government, for example, we're engaging with one department, and they might have specific use cases. So I think that's what our final case study here talks about, is kind of what this looks like at that scale, right? So let's jump over to there.
Thank you. That was another great transition. Thank you very much.
Again, we didn't practice this.
We did not practice this.
We should. Well, no, we shouldn't have, because it's great.
Yeah, but this is a really good use case. This is one that I've been very close to from the beginning. So this one's probably they've all got my heart, but this one in particular has got my heart in terms of scalability for Preserve365, because I think one of our earliest product challenges with this was Preservica has always served GLAM and kind of archives, museums, etc., and critical records that are generally, let's say, kind of a smaller part of the iceberg of data. And so as we grew Preserve365, we started thinking about, right, okay, if we're going to be taking records en masse, we need to really think about what is the largest volume of data that we could possibly be taking in, and how do we make sure that we manage that in a way that doesn't make our engineers and our operations teams sweat, and well, not too hard, at least anyway. Now,
just a glisten.
Yeah, just a little bit. This organization is a UK transportation department, and the numbers there aren't an exaggeration. They have way more than 38,000 SharePoint sites now. So their SharePoint site allocation grows per day. I think it's around about 600 to 700 sites per day. And the reason for this is that everybody has access and ability to create a SharePoint site within the tenancy. Everybody there is no real policy in place to stop anybody creating a site for whatever reason they want to. And quite often they will create a site just for an engineering visit. So for instance, you might have the rail infrastructure at a station might need to be checked to make sure that the welds are still safe on the joins in the line. They will have a SharePoint site created for that, and that will include links to the layout and the blueprints of the platforms and of the railway lines. That will include health and safety policies. That will include all the certifications that need signing off, everything that needs to be kept to prove that this job was done properly. And so that goes from records that are born digital in place in those SharePoint sites, but that also includes records that have been digitized but the original of that record. So for instance, this is what I was talking about earlier when we talk about the permanence of some of these records. Some of the blueprints and layouts of these stations are from Victorian times, and they are more than 150, 160 years old, but they are still referenced as the blueprint as the true record and blueprint for these stations. And so Preservica is now keeping that record safe for the next 150 plus years, for the next 200 years, if it needs to be kept for that long in a digitized format. But from a Preserve365 perspective, we need to make sure that those sites are captured at source and done quickly. The main issue that we had here was our archivist is a lone ranger. She's got a small team of people around her, but she is the archivist and record manager responsible for capturing the SharePoint sites before the engineers themselves go and close them, because they, again, have no idea that an archive even exists, but wonder where their 150-year-old station blueprint might come from.
Mm-hmm.
And the key thing here is that they need to capture the records before they're gone, essentially. What we originally did with this customer was we worked to help automate as much as possible using Power Automate, using Purview labeling. They've got a huge project with Microsoft at the moment to expand Purview and file planning out across the business, but it is, really, the scale of it was larger than even that would manage. And so we've actually built over the last couple of months and just released a full site archiving feature where you can take all of the lists and all of the records in a site in one click and put those into Preservica en masse. So they now have the ability to be able to trawl through sites day to day and say, this is a record, this is transitory, this is a record, this is transitory, move it all straight to Preservica before it can be lost, before it gets stuck in the noise. And it means that key health and safety and operational records are being kept for this agency as well.
Let me pull up the slide that shows, because this is the current state or the state before the project or the initiative. And here's the outcomes that you're alluding to here.
Yeah, for sure. So mention again FOIA requests, from our point of view in the UK, particularly from health and safety standpoint, we need to be able to make sure that health and safety has been followed, not just now, but right through in the past, and that there's been no kink in that chain. The ability for cross-department collaboration. This has actually opened up a huge visibility for the record manager and archivist in this case, because they can now speak with legal, with authority around being able to keep and access records. They can speak with project and engineering teams with authority to be able to say that we're keeping these records for a purpose and you just need to let us know once it's done and we can collapse the site for you. There's a lot of this hasn't just solved organizational issues. This has solved kind of aspirational issues for the records management team to be able to actually expand out their records management function as well. So it's been hugely beneficial to them.
Right. So Sam, I am just looking at our time. I want to make sure that there's time to take a look at the roadmap.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll transition into that. While we do that, let's fire up poll number 2 here to get thoughts on the case studies that were just shared. We're asking about the relevancy. I'm not going to read this one. And what I will do is get us geared up here for the roadmap. Sam, give your throat and your voice a little bit of a break there. I know you're also on the speaking circuit. It's not just allergy and cold season, but the speaking circuit too.
Yeah, this is the time of year where people get to hear my dulcet tones on the on the regular.
Right. Okay, so thank you all for responding to the poll. It certainly will. I think maybe it's still open. I'm trying to see here.
Yeah, It looks like we're still getting data through.
Yep. Perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, so
Great.
let me briefly just talk to you about the road that we've traveled and where we're going. Like I said, this has been a product that is still somewhat in its infancy if you look at it from a technology life cycle point of view. We're still relatively new with this, but we've matured using the kind of know-how and skill and expertise that we've got within Preservica, but also from working so closely with Microsoft as well and being able to work with their vast investment in technology. We've been able to far surpass where we expected to be, even from a technological and capability point of view right now. So this slide essentially shows you how I perceive that we are growing in scale and also in capability with Preserve365 just in the last 18, 24 months and where we're going in the next 18, 24 months. So you can see I've put a stake in the ground as to where we're at now. To the left of that is everything we already do. We've got file plan-based automation. We've got links to live archive files that we can leave behind in place in SharePoint. Lower cost to have those there, but you still access a true copy of the record. Lower cost storage tier support. So if you're thinking about volume and getting things out of SharePoint and into somewhere safe with preservation on top, then we are continually looking at lower cost options to be able to store that data as well while giving you the value of active digital preservation on top. Cross-org transfers I talked about with the Vermont example and full site archiving, as well as what I've just talked about that we just released for one of our other clients, but that is available to all of our customers too. Right now, we're in the process of making Preserve365 available for even more of the Microsoft estate. So Outlook, we're in what we call private preview with that at the moment. So we've got a select number of development partners and customers helping us build that in the best way possible. Integration with Copilot was always inevitable in the current way that the world is, and we're looking to make that as human-centric and as much of an assistant as possible. We want to be able to enhance your knowledge and enhance the scale at which you do things. We're not looking to completely recreate the wheel with this. We just want to make things faster and more capable for you. I would expect that we'll see that probably in the new calendar year. Preserve365 for Teams, we've had more people asking for that. But then also we've had new ecosystems. I can't tell you where we're looking at going next, but we are expanding out of Microsoft into other workspaces because we want to be able to capture as many records as possible from your point of view to keep them safe. We're also expanding our compliance integration with Purview. We want to be able to build that out even further by making sure that the Purview circle of trust that is kept within Microsoft means that the Preservica records need to be kept more within Microsoft. Obviously, we use Azure at the moment for storage, but we use Preservica, your Preservica tenant or a partner tenant to hold the records. What we want to be able to do is look at how we actually expand that out even further to have a full compliance scope as well with Microsoft. And then we've got other enhancements as well, such as advanced search for e-discovery and FOIA requests, and enhancing the record management lifecycle as well. So this is just kind of the next 18 months that we're going through from the last 18 months. And as you can see, it's growing at a huge pace. There'll be even more that comes into this, but we're just really proud of where it's gone. As you can tell by the way that I've taken us so close up to time, I can talk about this all day, but hopefully this was useful for you.
Yeah, and just for everyone here, we are intending to do more sessions, and so actually, if we fire up the third and final poll here to get some thoughts on where what everyone would like to see, what's going to have the greatest impact for your organization around what Sam just spoke about. Certainly, I know from the DocPoint side, we have seen a lot of organizations and clients asking us about the integration with Outlook, Teams, Copilot for data mining, and just centralized recall of information through the use of Copilot. So there's your polling question. And also, I want to just pause for a moment. I know we are running really close to time, so we're going to wrap up in a second. But there is a question here from Michelle And Michelle has asked, why is regular SharePoint not safe as a digital repository for records? Again, I think we could talk for another hour on that subject. We do actually talk for a while in, was it session 1 or 2, Scott? Probably.
Yeah.
Maybe both. So certainly, we'll have the recaps that we'll share, but Sam or Scott, can you give like a 1-sentence overview of that?
I'll quickly give a 1-sentence one and then I'll let Scott talk.
Yeah.
It's a content management system inherently. SharePoint is a content management system. It's not designed as a document repository or a preservation system, but that's how it's been used. And that is because of how flexible it is. So it comes with a lot of the freedom to access and use it and mess it up in the ways that a more secure repository would not allow it. Scott, I'll let you.
Yeah, I can add on that just a little bit, Sam. I don't know if saying it's not safe is the way I would typically describe, but I think it has to do with the preservation, like Sam was saying. It's not going to be able to support, especially, I always harp on this, the deprecated file types. There's really no way around that. So making sure that you're keeping all your content in a usable state and a usable format is one of the key functions there that I see. Hopefully we answered your question.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a really good answer.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for the question, Michelle. I also see a comment here about polling being blocked, but that someone has requested that, they'd love to hear more case studies, and we definitely intend to, actually it's in the works right now to get some of the clients to speak in the next series. So stay tuned on that. Also, in terms of, I'm going to skip over that, but in terms of next steps, if, from attending the sessions in this series, we've talked a lot about concepts. We did see a demo by Neil in the last session, but really, what's most important, I think, for everyone is how to turn ideas into actions. And so that's why we're here as a team. If you'd like to see how these strategies could work in real life for your specific organization, your records, your environment, please scan this QR code. Scott just put also the hyperlink in the chat here to request a demo. We'd be very happy to explore solutions that fit wherever you are in your process, whatever your records and environment and future goals are today. And one final plug here as we get ready to wrap up. Just on behalf of the DocPoint and Preservica teams, we just wanted to thank you all for joining us today, for joining us for this series. We really hope you picked up some practical ideas, and we look forward to engaging further outside of this space. If you did miss any of the previous series or want to revisit a session, you can watch all of that on demand here through this QR code and on our website. And again, we hope to hear from you, and stay tuned also for what might be coming up, reflections on more of those things from the roadmap that Sam shared and more use cases. Sam and Scott, any final words?
I can go first. I'm curious to know what states block polls.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know. I'm going to take that as a to-do, but no, it's just, it's taking the entire effort of preserving your content, making sure it's safe is really what we're talking about. And looking forward to doing some more webinars on this.
Mm-hmm. Indiana is clearly very locked down, so that's safety and security right there. Yep.
Yeah, my final bit was just going to be a big thank you to letting me talk about something that's very important to me personally, and also just seeing that these use cases resonated. It'd be great to speak with more people that have got problems that I think we can solve. So yeah, thank you for giving me the time.
All right, perfect. Top of the hour. Thank you all so much, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And hang in there, keep preserving your content, and stay the course. And we look forward to hearing from you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.